G'day, an F1 race can be won or lost in a pit stop. I've photographed quite a number of them in my time and they are high pressure moments for all the crew. But do you know what each of these crew members does when that car comes to a screeching halt? I do, and in a moment I'll enlighten you with the compliments of Canity, the world's best online staff training platform. The record for the fastest F1 pit stop is held by Red Bull. Back in 2019, they set the time of 1.92 seconds for 4 tyres off and 4 tyres on. A pretty impressive effort. And in this video, I'm going to enlighten you as to what all of these people in this picture actually do during one of those pit stops. First up, I should say it's pretty tricky getting a shot like this. Not too many tracks we can get it from. This is Carlos at the 2022 Italian Grand Prix in Monza. I'm actually standing in the media centre looking through glass, shooting down on his first pit stop. So let's start at the front. This is the front jackman. What's his job? Well, he raises the nose of the car. Does he have to be very strong? Not really. The jack is cantilevered, so he really is only lifting a percentage of the 800 kilogram weight of the car. And while he doesn't have to be that strong, he does need to have quick reactions, because oftentimes a car will come into the garage and not be perfectly centered, in which case he or she has to move that particular jack left or right, normally only by a little bit. It's a dangerous job, probably the most dangerous in a pit stop, because of the fact that he's standing with a car coming straight at him, hopefully decelerating to a stop on the driver's marks. There is a standby jackman at each of these pit stops and he's just out of frame. So when the car stops, his job is to get that jack underneath the car and raise it. Now it doesn't go up very far, just far enough to get the wheels on and off. And once all 4 tyres are on, he drops the jack, swings it out of the way, and the driver exits the pit box. Next up is the front wing adjuster. And they do exactly as the title would suggest. They adjust the front wing with a tool that they have. If they don't need to adjust the wing, they will then clear out any debris, any rubber, even helmet tear-offs that sometimes get stuck in that front wing. And also he'll check for structural damage. Of course, all of these crew members are well trained. Imagine if you and your workmates were as well trained as these pit crew members were. Well, that's now possible with Canity.com, the world's best online staff training platform. Hundreds of short, sharp, sometimes humorous videos designed to have you and your team performing at their peak. At the end of this video, click on the Canity.com link in the description for more info. You won't regret it. Next up is the wheel-off guy. Now, are all these jobs done by males? Well, mostly, but there are a couple of women who I've seen in pit crews. For instance, this is Amelia Rath. She was the wheel-off woman when I took this particular picture during one of the practice sessions. It must be remembered too that we're now using bigger tyres than we were the year before last, so that front wheel-off person needs to be a little bit stronger. The trick is to pull the wheel off straight and then swing it out of the way. They then stand or kneel nearby, waiting for the end of the pit stop. I should mention too that all the crew need to be fit, strong and healthy, and they train quite diligently back at the factory. And they also have access to a nutritionist, a physio, conditioning coach, all of the essential people, because this is a serious business. How often will they practice? Well, I'll get to that a little bit later in the video. Let's go on to the gunner now. He is here on his knees with a pneumatic tyre gun, and this thing is loud. In fact, if you don't know it's going to be set off, it can frighten the hell out of you. His job is to place that gun over the wheel nut, fire it in the reverse direction, unscrewing the nut, which is actually attached to the wheel nowadays. But they used to be separate. They'd often carry a spare wheel nut, which was cable tied to their race suit. Once the tyre's been changed, he changes the direction of the pneumatic gun, and then he screws that wheel nut back on. Now, he can't press the trigger until the nut's in place, or he could grind the nut. That's exactly what happened to Valtteri Bottas in Monaco 2021. Valtteri couldn't continue on in that race because the wheel could not be changed. In fact, they weren't able to undo that wheel nut until they got the car back to the factory the week after. When he's done that successfully, he simply raises his pneumatic gun into the air, and that signals that that wheel is all A-OK. He's wearing knee pads, as you can see here, and like all of the crew, they have to wear this kit the whole race. There's no nipping off to the toilet mid-race because they don't know when they are going to be required in pit lane. Where do they wait during the race? In the garage, sat on these fold-out chairs. They are assembled once the car goes to the grid. And then they wait for their cue that a pit stop is up and coming. The third person on each wheel is the wheel-on person. Once the old tyre's been taken off, they have to swing that new tyre in perfect harmony with the old one leaving. They can't go early, they can't knock the tyres, and they have to put it on straight, and then they often have to rotate it just a smidge because they've got to get the 5 small pegs into the 5 of the many holes that are inside the rim. And if you ever see a wheelman bang the tyre, that often means that the pegs aren't in correctly. See these two here? They are car steadiers. When the car's jacked up, it's not that far off the ground, and it's easy to rock the car, which would compromise the tyres coming off and going on. To that end, the driver has to hold the steering wheel rock solid while the car's raised, and that keeps the wheel straight. Well, the other job of the steadiers too is to look for debris in the side pods, which could interrupt airflow and cause the car to overheat. And if the car comes in with no front wing, well, they can't use the front jack. So how do they jack the car up then? Well, they use side jacks. There's one at the bottom of the shot you can just see creeping in. Oh, and sometimes those steadiers will also clean the driver's visor. Let's go to the back of the car now, and there are 3 people on each of the rear tyres. Now these are a larger tyre, heavier, and obviously you need to be a little bit stronger and a bit more agile because they are tricky to manoeuvre. And then at the rear of the car we have the rear jackman. Now he does need to be stronger than the front jack as there is more weight at the back of the car. He also has to be aware that when the front jack rises, the car could move forward because there's nothing braking it. The rear jack is also a little bit trickier to manoeuvre because unlike the front one, the guy just has to stand there, at the back they have to swing it in from the side once the car is passing. See these crew members? Well, they all hold a button and they're focused on one wheel each, and when they're happy that their wheel is secure, they release a button. Then if it's safe for the car to be released, this fella releases his button, which turns on the green light here, and the driver is free to leave. Of course, he has to be careful that there are no other cars coming down pit lane, and to minimise unsafe releases, there is a rule that says if a car coming along pit lane has passed a certain point, you cannot release your car. What is the driver's role in a pit stop? Well, obviously he has to put the car in the exact right spot. There are marks on the ground. If he's 30 centimetres or a foot out, that could cause delays in the pit stop. And even though we're only talking fractions of a second, in the scheme of F1, that can be crucial. Once he's stopped, he puts the car into neutral, holds the wheel steady, focuses on the light, and then when he's given that light, he's off. Looking at all the crew members here, you can see that everyone is wearing a helmet, gloves, race suit, and I should say too that they don't have to be fireproof race suits, although one person has to have a fireproof suit, and that is the refueler, although of course we don't refuel during the races. But you can tell the refueler because they have normally a different coloured suit on. And on the fuel, that's put in before the start of the race, and they use a dry brake system. What is that, you say? Well, effectively, in layman's terms, you can't see the fuel at any stage going in. It's a very closed system. And how many litres do they put in? Well, they don't put in litres, they put in kilograms or pounds of fuel. But there must be 1 litre of fuel left in the tank at the end of the race, as the FIA needs to take a fuel sample. And looking closely at this picture, you'll notice that everyone has a 2-way radio on their belt, and it's wired to an earpiece, so can they all hear what's going on? Yes. But only some of them can speak through the system. The others communicate with hand gestures, and you might have seen this when a wheel doesn't go on properly. If you've been lucky enough to head down to pit lane and watch a pit stop, you might have noticed that there are many cameras on the gantries above the cars, and you'll also find cameras on a number of team members' helmets. Now that's so that the teams can review their pit stops and work out how they can improve them. And while I was researching this video, for the first time I noticed that you can see some padding on the back of these suits. I'm sure that's better than no padding, but in the event of a tyre getting loose and running down pit lane, I'm not sure that's going to do too much. I want to go back to the subject of wheel nuts. And going back a few years ago, I understand that Red Bull had an automatic system on their wheel gun, so it detected when it was ready to change from screw on to screw off. But whilst it made things a little bit quicker, I believe it's now banned. For those of you wondering how the driver knows where to stop, let's first of all take a look at the fact that in a very busy pit lane, there may be a number of cars coming and going. So the driver is looking for their crew member who will grab their attention and direct them into the right pit box. They'll then look for an arrow and they will attempt to stop right on their marks. Now sometimes they'll use a system with an arrow that has a laser in it. You can see here Fernando Alonso looking at this particular system at the end of last year, but I'm told a lot of drivers struggle to see that particular green laser. So most of the time they position themselves based on the pit crew. But the closer they stop to the marks, Obviously, the less distance their team has to move, and theoretically that leads to a quicker pit stop. And when you're talking about a sport in which a 305-kilometre race can be won or lost by a second, pit stops play a pivotal role. So practice, when do they practice? Well, they do it over the whole race weekend. They'll do Thursday, Friday and Saturday mornings typically. In session stops, yes, they'll do those on Friday and Saturday mornings, but never in quali, unless it's wet. Sunday morning, there's more practice, and if you ever get, say, a pit lane walk, if you take an F1 Experiences package, you will absolutely adore watching these pit stops. For all the crew, though, it's second nature for them. They are so well practiced. Oh, and the other thing, you can always hear a perfect pit stop because all of the guns are perfectly in time. So what are the rules? Well, every team needs to stop at least once during a race because you have to run 2 sets of tyres. You have to change all tyres. There's no just changing 1 or 2. There's no refueling anymore. That stopped in 1984. And then it started again in 1994. That's in-race fueling. And then it was banned again in 2010. Just simply too dangerous. And things have certainly changed over the years. Have a look at how the times for a pit stop have reduced from, say, 67 seconds going back to 1950 down to a couple of seconds now. And there are numerous YouTube videos going back some years where you can see that they've only had 1 tyre man on. Now there are 3 on every wheel. Oh, and another thing you might have picked up on is these gentlemen here. There's an unwritten rule that airlines are kept out of the way, and you do that for the team behind you. It's not set in stone, but it is a gentleman's agreement. As far as I can tell, all the teams abide by it. While most pit stops go to plan, of course, there are the occasional disaster. And I'll go back to Daniel Ricciardo, Monaco, 2016. You'll remember that pit stop when the tyres weren't out there. He lost the race because of that and was very dark. Why did it happen? See, in Monaco, there's only a limited number of tyres that they can keep out the front of the garage. And because the pit wall can't see what's on the ground like in most other tracks, they're actually upstairs, can't even see into the garage. Someone's called for a set of tyres that were a lot further away than normal. That introduced a delay. Daniel sat there forever and lost the race. These days there can be up to 4 racks of tyres out the front of the garage, and the wet and medium tyres will be out the back. So race weekends, there could be up to 32 tyres in each garage waiting to be used. A couple of other things you might be interested in: pit lane speed limits. For safety reasons, they can't go faster than 80 kilometres an hour, or in some races like, say, Zandvoort, it's even lower than that at 60. When the driver hits a line, he hits the button just prior. That brings him to the right speed limit so he does not get penalised. And as I mentioned earlier, you have to change all 4 tyres at a stop. Although it shouldn't take any longer to change 4 tyres than it does to take 1. So it is possible for 20 plus people to change 4 tyres in a couple of seconds in modern F1 racing. Next time you watch a pit stop, hopefully you'll look out for a few of the things that we've discussed today. If you've enjoyed the video, could you please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so, and become a member for a whole host of extras. You'll find all of my digital images at prostarpics.com. For F1 wall art, my beautiful F1 photo books, a wide range of my merchandise, plus prints signed by drivers and team principals, go to kimillman.com. And for my best images live from the track and all during the week, go to Instagram and search my name, @KimIllman. Thanks for watching and stay passionate. Here we go.
Here we go!